Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blockchain Banter Unfiltered. I have an amazing panel with me here today. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves and give a brief introduction of the projects and what they do in DeFi as well. Caezor, I see you next to me, so maybe I'll go ahead and start with you if you don't mind.
Sure, I'm Caezor of Caezor Snack Sandwich. I do a whole bunch of stuff in DeFi. I started out with like a YouTube channel. I still run it. I consult with a whole bunch of projects and kind of help out and stuff like that. And of course, I use DeFi massively and quite extensively. So that's kind of basically what I am and what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Caezor. Josh, maybe you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, CEO of Aori. I guess we're at off-chain order book, intent layer, whatever you want to call it, with an on-chain settlement for transactions. Coming out soon. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark, if you would.
Sure. I'm the project lead at Bancor. Bancor was the company to sort of it launched its ICO in 2017 to raise money to invent and produce something called the automatic market maker, which has been popularized now across a lot of different projects in DeFi. And it has since moved on to order book-like infrastructure. And Carbon DeFi is the latest product from Bancor with that philosophy in mind.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And Matt, this is your first time joining us, so welcome to Blockchain Banter. Thank you for joining our conversation, for being here with us. If you would introduce yourself and Odos as well, that would be awesome.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Matt. I'm co-founder and head of research at Odos. So we are a DeFi aggregator and routing solution. So we aggregate all the DEXs and AMMs on each chain that we're on, and then we find the best route for any given trade or order to get the best rate.
Perfect. Thank you. So I invited Matt on here specifically to this call because I was recently having a debate with Mark, actually, about aggregators and arbitrageurs. And I had always considered them two separate things, right? And we were talking about order execution on Carbon DeFi, actually, with aggregators and arbitrageurs being two of the main sources of, as takers, actors. And he said they're one and the same. So we were having this debate, and I wanted to kind of expand on this and get everybody's take on it. Maybe we can start with, for anybody who might be tuning into this and kind of just getting their feet wet in DeFi, maybe one of you wouldn't mind volunteering to just maybe give a brief explanation of what an aggregator does. I mean, Matt, you kind of did just now, right? If you want to expand on that a little bit, then you can. And the role an arbitrageur takes in DeFi.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So DeFi has tons of places to trade, tons of DEXs. Most of them are AMMs, but even the ones that aren't basically adjust. They have different prices they provide you, and they adjust prices differently as you trade more and more. So you end up with a very complex problem figuring out where to trade. And because they adjust prices as you trade more and more through them, splitting between them is also oftentimes the way to get the best rate. So manually going to different UIs and swapping through different DEXs is not really a reasonable way to go about it. So that's why DEX aggregators exist and routing solutions exist to aggregate all those sources and then figure out the best way to split between all the DEXs and all the pools. I guess an arbitrageur plays a somewhat similar role in that they watch multiple pools on different DEXs, across different DEXs, sometimes across different chains. And they're basically just looking for price differences so that they can buy in one place and sell in another place and make a profit by doing that.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. I know Mark's opinion on this, so I want to ask Caezor and Josh if you guys want to chime in here at all. Do you want to, first of all, add anything to Matt's definition or description of aggregators and arbitrageurs, or do you want to voice what your opinion is on whether you see them as one and the same?
Yeah, I'll maybe give like I'll jump in with like a small like interesting bit. So something funny that a good friend of mine runs another aggregator that's live, and it's one of the chains on Arbitrum, for example, where they had like very, very low gas fees. What they noticed people were doing was pinging their API twice, but providing the opposite input and output tokens and input and output amounts, and then finding positive cycles so that you could actually, through the same aggregator, arbitrage, or execute an arbitrage using their system. So they were like swapping in USDC and getting USDT, and then swapping USDT back and getting USDC, and only executing when they were getting more USDC than they started with. Which, when you look under the hood, isn't actually an arbitrage, but like a delta neutral trade. So it's pretty interesting. So when you look at like the infrastructure behind a lot of aggregators, and I bet Matt, I'd love your take on this too. What you find is that the actual architecture is almost identical. The only difference is whether or not you're actually executing when you see price differences across different pools that you're monitoring, or you're providing the best optimal route across those identical pools. Like I bet like the code between an MEV solver, like a dex arb bot, and a high frequency aggregator are probably very, very similar. It's maybe just the strategy.rs or whatever, or whatever your strategy file is, that might be a little bit different. But yeah, that's just a little take on it.
Yeah, I guess I would say I would definitely agree. The core is the same. I think there's some very important details depending on which one you're doing, but the core is definitely an arbitrage. So it's that part is the same.
I'll add an important point here, and that is for the most part, arbitrage bots tend to be single entities, maybe a company or a person, and they're just basically extracting that value by toxic flow, so to speak, right? So they're just taking that value that's there and not actually doing any like orders. They don't have any intention other than taking that value, that is that difference in the value that's there. Whereas like a DEX aggregator supplies a service to people who actually want to trade tokens, and people who actually want to like hold some token or do something. So there's very few people who go to a DEX aggregator and do what Josh just described, right? And in fact, it's probably arbitrage bots that are doing what Josh just described, right? So what a person does is that what they want to buy a token. They don't want to buy it and then immediately sell it. They generally want to buy it. So it's kind of like there's like a moral question inside there. Like both are necessary. Both are not terrible, but like I would consider a DEX aggregator slightly higher on the moral scale than a arbitrage bot, because they're actually creating a better user experience for everyone, as opposed to just trying to keep things balanced and extract a little bit of value for doing so. Like I'm not saying arbitrage bots are evil or supremely toxic, but they are lower on that moral scale than what a DEX aggregator is trying to do, I think.
So you see them as two different things. To the original question, but you brought up a couple of really you brought up a couple of points. You definitely see them.
I see there's difference there, but they're doing the same thing. Like if you use a DEX aggregator, I would say that you're performing arbitrage, because you are performing arbitrage. Like you're balancing pools. Your swaps are going through multiple pools in order to keep those pools balanced, right? So you are an arbitrager, but like an arbitrage bot that's just trying to balance the pools and extract value is very different than a DEX aggregator that's like, hey, if you trade here, you're going to get a better price because we're going to look at all the pools for you. Like that's very different, but the actual underlying like system is, as these guys described already, is very similar. Like they are like DEX aggregators are performing arbitrage. I guess
Mark,
that.
yeah, I want to come back to a couple of things that you're saying, but I want to give Mark a turn to speak. I'm going to pass it over to you, Mark, if you have, I mean, I know, like I said, this discussion started with, a debate that we were having. So maybe you can go into why you see them as one and the same. And then if you want to add to anything that Ceazor, Josh, or Matt said, please do.
Yeah. So I think it's important that I sort of crystallize, even make make it obvious how extreme my view is on this. They are indistinguishable. There is no difference between aggregation and arbitrage. The thing that we do when we're having these discussions is to bring in this human element, which is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, an arbitrage is a risk-free trade. If someone is offering price X and another person is offering a different price slightly less than X, you are performing an arbitrage by taking the lower price. It doesn't matter what you do with the thing after you buy it, right? It's like if I go to Bing right now, right, or wherever they call the thing that powers Microsoft Edge, and I look at, flights, it will present me with, flights from whatever destination I'm going to whatever, from whatever destination I want to depart from. And it will present a list of prices. And if I choose a lower price compared to the higher price, I'm arbitraging airline prices. It doesn't matter if I turn around and then sell that to someone else at a higher price. The fact is that I've compared two different prices and taken a risk-free trade, right? Because if I bought the higher ticket, the higher price ticket, I would be in loss compared to buying the cheaper ticket. Or from another perspective, I have gained a certain amount of value by choosing to purchase the lower price ticket. If I go and turn around and sell that to someone else is irrelevant. I consider, and this is what Josh has just pointed out, what most people think of arbitrage is really just doing that system twice, right? I'm looking first for the lowest price and then for the highest price, but I'm looking for the lowest. I'm looking for the highest bidding price and the lowest asking price. And if those two things happen to pass each other, then I can, perform two arbitrage trades, one buying the thing and then one selling it. But you don't require the second leg in order to qualify as an arbitrage. This is the same is true of cell phone carriers, right? If you're with a current cell phone carrier and someone says, I can offer you a better deal, and they say, look, you're getting all of this data or all of these minutes or whatever your deal is, and you say, yes, I'll take the cheaper contract, you've just arbitraged, the cell phone providers. And the same is true of insurance, right? There are insurance aggregators that will sort of let you know when you're paying too much on your insurance, or even for things like your electricity and other amenities. And these are actually powered by, they call themselves aggregators, but there's actually an arbitrage trade in the background where, and this is true of airline prices as well. Often the price that's quoted to you, the person who is offering it to you doesn't yet have the ticket, and they'll wait for you to buy it, and then they'll send you a confirmation later, right? And sometimes you get rejected. And this is because the person that's offering it to you is just quoting that price, expecting to be able to buy it somewhere else and then sell it to you after the fact. So these are all just components of exactly the same system, where people are always trying to get the best price, right? They're either trying to get the highest price they can for the thing that they're selling, or the lowest price for the thing that they're trying to buy. And as long as there is disagreement in the market, whenever you choose a price that is different from someone else's price and it benefits you, you have closed an arbitrage, even if you don't, reverse that trade in the second leg. But this is the definition of an arbitrage. It's a risk-free trade.
Matt, do you see yourselves as an arbitrageur? And like Mark, I have the same question for you too, because Bancor developed the Arb Fast Lane. I mean, it is what you consider, Mark, and what Bancor considers to be an arbitrage framework, right?
Yeah,
or an arbitrage bot. And Matt, I mean, you guys consider yourselves to be an aggregator. Do you ever consider yourself to be an arbitrageur? And if not, like, going back to what Mark was just saying, why don't you?
Well, you guys kind of are on cow swap, right? Like isn't a cow swap, Phil, like kind of a delta neutral trade, right? Between the end user and the pools.
Yeah, I think if you're filling like a cow swap order or cow swap order is a limit order. It kind of like filling an order is arbitraging that order also. So I think that's another interesting angle. As far as our service in general, I would say we are an arbitrageur when we aggregate and route, but I do think it's worth making a distinction on the type of arbitrage we capture versus like a dedicated arbitrage operation might capture. I think we're sort of, as an aggregator, we're uniquely positioned to capture arbitrage that's not worth capturing on its own. Does that make sense? Because there's sort of a gas overhead when you capture an arbitrage opportunity. So the fact that we're already trying to go between two assets means like we can include arbitrage opportunities in that route that otherwise would not be closed. Whereas a dedicated arbitrage operation is going after the ones that like you pay gas and then there's like a profit margin after you pay gas. So that I think is the distinction in the opportunities that are collected, but I think both are doing arbitrage, as Mark pointed out.
So you can operate as an arbitrageur, right?
Are
Like,
operating
okay,
as an arbitrageur.
not
One of the reasons this began is because I pointed out that if we took the fast lane and just ran it in reverse, it would be aggregating. There's no need to nominate. Like, for example, with the way that the arb fast lane is constructed, you get to choose your destination asset, right? So you can perform like an arbitrage from USDC into ETH, right? And it will close any arbitrage opportunities along the way in order to do that. Most people would call that an aggregate, right? That's order routing. It's just that most people, when they're doing it, they say if we start in ETH, we end in ETH, or if we start in USDC, we end in USDC, and so on. But you can also say, I want to start in USDC and finish in two different assets, or I want to start in two different assets and finish in one asset. And the logic underneath it is exactly the same, right? In fact, that's using a literal bot that is used to perform arbitrage, and just running it as an aggregator. It's not to say that these things are similar. I do consider them identical. The difference is cultural, right? It's like, why did someone do this trade, right? And what were they motivated by, and what are they trying to achieve? And we say, well, if you're motivated by these kinds of things, then we consider you an arbitrageur. But as like Ceazor has pointed out, it's like, well, if you just wanted to buy that token, that's okay. But this is a weird, like, human thing that we do, right? In terms of like the financials, it doesn't make any difference, and the effect that it has on the system overall is the same. At some level, you cannot tell the difference between an aggregated trade, like someone just choosing to buy something at the lowest price that they can get it at, and someone doing that for the explicit use case of selling it somewhere else at the same time. But yeah, it's I think that the difference that we ascribe to these things is artificial, right? It's how we feel about them, not what they're actually doing, that changes.
Can I jump in here for a sec?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's one thing that's what Match said that was pretty interesting, and I want to kind of highlight on this. What he said about the gas, like when a person trades, they're willing to pay that gas. They've taken that gas cost into account, hopefully, or they just don't care about the gas cost. Whereas an arbitrage, or a person who's just purely trying to arbitrage and make a profit, they have to add that gas to the transaction, the cost of that, in order to be profitable, right?
The same is actually true of aggregation, right? If you've tried to use 1inch like Fusion X or something, when the chain is congested, they'll just reject all of your transactions because the gas is too high, right?
Yeah.
Really quickly, wait, so for Matt and Josh too, I see Ceazor and Mark are unmuted. You guys could just chime in here. I mean, we're all friendly and respectful of each other, so it's not like I have to call on you,
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to add to that was, like, if every single person was using DEX aggregators to do trades, and the DEX aggregators were looking at every single pool, then there would be no arbitrage bots. They would do nothing, because they are like, people pay gas without considering it. Like, I do trades, and I don't
I
even
guess-
think about how much it costs sometimes.
Yeah, but the other perspective there is that like they've just become the arbitrageurs, right? Or that they've fulfilled the same chasm, right? What you're observing there is that if there is a 100% efficient market, and I'm not sure that one exists, but let's pretend that one can exist, then everyone will agree on the price all the time. And sure, like that might lead to market stagnation or whatever, but let's just say that things, continue as normal. In those circumstances, it's interesting to see how some of like the hubris in DeFi starts to fall apart, because even if there is never an arbitrage trade possible, people will still complain that they've, their portfolio rebalancing has bled a huge amount of value to arbitrageurs, right? That their IL is still the result of people, trading with them, except in this case, no arbitrage would ever have been performed, or are the LPs correct? And all of the trades are actual arbitrage trades. And this is kind of my perspective, is that every single trade anyone has ever executed is in some sense an arbitrage trade. The only reason someone buys something is because they think it is either less than or equal to the value that it represents. But in general, when things get closer and closer to the value that people internally think that it is worth, they trade less and less. When something is undervalued compared to what they think it's worth, they will perform like an internal arbitrage against their own, valuation of that thing. But that is a type of arbitrage, or at least, culturally, the way that we're dealing with it, we should consider that to be a type of arbitrage. And this is, I'm not, I would prefer that we don't treat things that way, but that's clearly the way that people like handling things. Because if you have a look at, people that are arguing that LPs should be given sort of like a kickback from MEV or from arbitrage or something like that, what they're really saying is that if this person who traded with me was happy to pay that price, then I probably should have asked for a higher price, right? Like it doesn't matter whether or not they're performing an arbitrage in the typical way, the way that, all three of us, I think, or all four of us are aware of what people mean when they say arbitrage. But in this specific case, people are saying, actually, if they were happy to trade with me at that price, then I got screwed because I didn't offer a higher price. And they, this is, it's all a part of this same very badly understood sort of visceral reaction to sort of normal market dynamics. But yeah, I do think that at least at some very, very basal level, like completely abstract, every single trade is an arbitrage trade, and that's a position I'm prepared to defend.
I have a may I totally change subject?
Yeah.
Please.
I have questions for our guest, Mr. Matt over at Odos. I'd love to know, like, I'm a very, very close follower of the cow swap space, and like especially like the aggregation space in general. Like, we work at Aori with a lot of solvers and a lot of aggregators, and they're basically the same thing. And in many cases are both. One thing I'd love to get your take on, or like maybe learn more about Odos, just because a lot of this isn't public, or like is kind of hidden away. But I'd love to know, like, a lot of the solvers and aggregators we talk to and work with especially have like focuses, right? Like, I know there are some groups that like are basically writing hyper optimized C code for building UniV2 and UniV3 math like in the fastest possible to provide bids on CowSwap in the fastest possible way. And other solvers are like, we're going to go as long tail as possible and try to get as many new liquidity sources so that we can have an edge on like those kind of trades. Where do you see like Odos in the solver world? And I guess I'd love to know more about like what you guys see your like edge as solvers.
Yeah, definitely. So we started Odos because of the routing algorithm itself, or at least the beginnings of it, and the way that we sort of could route seemed different than how other people were doing it. So that was sort of the start of the company. I would say at this point we do have both of the things you just mentioned, the hyper optimized math for the routing, as well as trying to track as many pools as possible to also cater to the long tails. I think with CowSwap in particular, something I'd highlight for us is our multi-input and multi-output routing, which is very useful for batch auctions. As far as I know, there aren't any solvers that like actually do that routing well, maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't know much about a lot of their internal operations, but a lot of times what you'll see is just routing single input, single output multiple times, and then just executing them one after the other as multi-input, multi-output. And that doesn't use gas very effectively. And if you happen to use the same pool twice, then you're causing yourself slippage. You're front running yourself. So that's not a very effective solution. So the fact that we've already worked into our routing multiple inputs and multiple outputs, and like considering how do we actually route those all together, that's something I think brings a lot of value to solving the batch auctions. And that's something we still have to realize at a higher level, I'd say. We just started the CowSwap solver, and I'd say there's still a lot to be done there. There's a lot of CowSwap specific things to consider beyond like our core routing. But
I guess like how do you see like existing? This is like a question I get. Sorry, if anybody else wants to ask questions or do anything, please jump in. But
well, and they could chime in too.
Yeah, I'm very curious. Like, it seems like from all the existing new solver networks and like the things like Astaria, for example, like with lending, the word solver is going to look a lot different in like 6 months or a year than it does today. Like, I guess, do you think that a lot of solvers similar to now are going to spec into like individual niches or try to be as general as possible and like use existing routing algorithms for like even things like lending, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there'll be both. I think our perspective is we want to continue being as general as possible. So integrating lending protocols, liquid staking, like the actual liquid staking, yield optimizers when those positions are tokenized, all these things where you're doing some other DeFi action, but the end result is still tokenized, and then it can be integrated into routing directly. That's something we've started to do a bit. I think in the future we'll continue to expand. And so being able to essentially do these more complex DeFi actions in addition to routing, what you would think of as more traditional trades, is definitely
I kind of have a weird theory too. I think actually what'll happen is instead of, and this is also interesting as well regarding like today's conversation. I have a theory that like with things like a Noma or things like what we're trying to build, and like even there's a couple good examples of this as well. Like you might even see that like there are platforms that abstract out the user's intention such that it still feels to the solver like you're just filling a CowSwap order. So like, for example, like opening a loan won't look like, it can be deconstructed into limit orders, for example, in such a way that like, you don't even have to adapt your route, your internal algorithm in any way. You can just plug into it. I think that might be interesting. That might be something that like, I don't know if many solver networks are like maybe thinking about that, but like, the less work you have to make the solver do, I suppose, like, and the more you can make like existing solving algorithms like work for as user intents, become more complex. That might be an interesting place or interesting.
Yeah. So you're saying the solver and marketplace or network essentially does the part that might be less common, and then
correct. Yeah.
And I think we see that not necessarily with intents, but we see people using our routing with some other DeFi action, and they do that other DeFi action themselves, and then use us for the routing. So I think already see that a lot. I think we'd like to continue being able to do those actions as well, but certainly it makes it easier especially if it's a more niche action.
Look at like liquidations. People are doing this already with aggregators, like
exactly
aggregators to find.
Mark, that's what you are, or Bancor is doing with the Arb Fastlane, right? Using Carbon DeFi for this.
For what? For liquidations?
For liquidation, or maybe not necessarily liquidation. I should backtrack.
Yeah, but no, that's it's similar. Like these are there are parallel threads there, but we don't actually integrate, I think, with any like liquidation systems at the moment. Probably something we should look into. But yeah, usually the liquidation auctions are a different kettle of fish. In general, we try to stay like flash loan heavy. So, and liquidations can often mean that you are forced to take exposure because you don't necessarily know how the auction is going to resolve or when. But yeah, there are some systems that actually can be flash loaned and are compatible with liquidations. I'm just not familiar enough with it to have an authoritative opinion.
I was speaking about the automatic auctioneer, but maybe I'm mistaken in how I'm kind of defining that a little bit then.
Yeah, I mean, auctions in general, like auctions are just a very valuable and somewhat missing primitive from the way that the DeFi markets have historically operated. But things like one-inch fusion, like CowSwap, like even Uniswap X to some extent, are starting to sort of sprinkle in a little bit more of that sort of auction, mechanic. And I would expect many DeFi protocols, Bancor included, we've already spoken openly about how the automatic auctioneer works and the fact that we're using it for our own purposes. And this will, the idea is to have this be a type of like a literal order type, within Carbon DeFi proper. But yeah, this is just one of, several. I also noticed that I think Wyon has actually introduced an auction model recently. I think I saw that in one of their tweets for something.
Sorry, who
Wyon. I'm pretty sure it was Wyon. Yeah. But yeah, it's general. This is a very, very broad topic. It's not specific to liquidations or arbitrage or aggregation. This is a completely different way of pricing things.
Can I jump in here? I wanted to Eli 5, something that Matt said. I use Odos pretty much for a large majority of my trades now because I just enjoy it, and I think they're working really hard to integrate a lot of liquidity pools, and I think that's very important. But one of the things he did say, where he was saying multi-input, multi-output, like I just wanted to Eli 5 that for everybody who's listening. Like what he's talking about here is you can go to Odos and you can say, I have token 1, token 2, token 3, and I want to sell them all for USDC. And then execute it. It'll route all 3 of those tokens through different pools or whatever has to be done and get you that single output or something like this. Like that's pretty powerful. I haven't seen that anywhere except for on Odos. So kudos to you guys for building that.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that.
Mark, before I brought up the Arb Fastlane, when Josh was speaking about intents and orders, right?
Mhm.
And seeing the liquidations kind of broken down into orders, you were shaking your head as if you were agreeing with him. I didn't know if you wanted to add something to that before I had kind of changed the subject.
No, I think, I mean, Josh and I see, like, disappointingly, we see eye to eye on almost everything. But no, this idea that
eye to eye with you because you're wearing sunglasses. Sorry, but sorry, that was terrible. That was terrible. No, you can keep them on. It was a joke. It was a joke.
This idea that you can deconstruct a lot of what DeFi does, or even a lot of what finance does, like into something that looks a little bit like a limit order, right? And if you add sort of time dependence, like a Dutch auction system or something on top of that, you can pretty much describe, like, these are the 2 atoms of the only 2 elements of an exchange system. And so you can compose those in various different ways that would allow for all kinds of things to be achieved. And you remember, Jen, that when we first launched Carbon DeFi, I was actually I was speaking with a bunch of different lending protocols about how this could actually be a slightly better way to run liquidations on, like, loans, because the arbitrage network and searcher network generally are much more efficient, or they accept a much smaller kickback in terms of the profits that they expect, compared to liquidation bots, which generally have an enormous, like 5-6%, sometimes higher, carry.
And huge impact on the market too.
Yeah, and I remember, at that time, if you're looking at the EigenFi, website, who was tracking, what the most significant forms of MEV are, I think liquidations had the most they had at that time, I think, the world record for the most MEV extracted from a single transaction was from a liquidation. But yeah, and I'm sure that in composite it's not nearly that effective, but it was still interesting to see that all of the extremes were from these from liquidations. And this shouldn't be surprising, like we just had Avi, the Mango finance exploiter, is now in jail over essentially precipitating liquidations when one didn't necessarily have to be performed. And there's all kinds of manipulations that work this way. But yes, I agree with Josh. Some of this complexity can be decomposed, and you can represent it as a limit order, or as you can reorganize a lot of this information to make it look like an order book. I think is probably the better way to articulate it.
To give like a concrete example of what we're talking about here, like let's say I have a deposit on Yearn Finance. That's a yield bearing vault. So let's say I have a deposit on Yearn Finance, but there are no liquidity pools for my Yearn deposit share token. So I could put up a limit order that says, hey, I want to sell this Yearn token for USDC, and I want this much USDC. And then a solver could then be like, oh, I can do that. And he would withdraw my assets from Yearn for me and then sell it through whatever market and get me my USDC. That's something that could easily be looked at as simply as a limit order, even though there's no actual liquidity pool for that Yearn share token. I have a question for Matt about Odos. When you guys decided to become a DEX aggregator, right? Obviously, you have experience with arbitrage. So why did you guys build a DEX aggregator instead of just arbing liquidity pools and extracting that value directly to you guys and competing in the arbitrage? What made you decide to be a DEX aggregator instead of just a hidden arbitrage bot?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it goes back to, well, at least part of it goes back to what we were discussing earlier, where being a DEX aggregator and actually solving orders is a service. And I think providing a service, especially as crypto grows, there's more people using it. Routing is sort of the core of everything when everything's tokenized, right? We were talking about even lending protocols, yield optimizers, liquid staking being tokenized. So getting from one token to another is the core of all this, especially even as non-financial things are built on crypto, they're still leveraging tokens, and routing between them is useful. So providing that service we see as extremely that's a huge thing over the long term. Compared to arbitraging pools, I think that's still something we're interested in, but it's over as competition grows, as people are also competing for that arbitrage, that profit approaches zero, because it all goes to the validators and miners. So it's not really it's something you do while you have an edge, and that's great, and you can make profit, but over the long term, you're not really building anything sustainable, because any day someone could be competing with you and take away that edge. So
Interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I was mostly done. I was just going to say I see it as mostly sort of something an individual can definitely do, a company can do as maybe sort of a side thing, but as a main business, I don't think it really makes a whole lot of sense.
Josh, you unmuted. Caezor, I don't know if you wanted to add to anything, because I wanted to ask a question too, but you guys take
I have
it.
a super technical question, Matt. I bet there will be several opinions on this, but have you guys been following the CeFi DeFi? I mean, you'll see why I'm asking this question, but have you been following the CeFi DeFi ARB world, and block building in general?
Yeah, I would say a little bit at a high level. I think in the future we want to get into that niche a little closer.
Yeah, okay, this is going straight into my question. Okay, a question I still can't find an answer to, and I have no clue why, is when you're basically running non-atomic arbitrage trades, it makes a ton of sense to run a block builder, right? Like we can kind of see this with Beaver, with with rsync, like, and there are a couple smaller ones that are kind of starting to kind of get into this. But the question that I immediately have is, like, when you look at like the amount of gas that is paid for a async arb, right? Like CFI DeFi, for example, versus the amount of gas that's paid for, let's say, atomic arb, like Jared from Subway transactions, sandwiches in general, even just pure background transactions. You think it would make way more sense for I guess these atomic arbors to run their own block builders as well, or at least create maybe some like dex arb, like union, I suppose, block builder, like a neutral searcher builder, I suppose. Like, but this is something I'm super curious about, is like why do you think it's only penetrated in like the trading firm space, like for CFI arb? Like, wouldn't it make sense, I suppose, like to be able to like take back some of the P&L from the validators, especially for like solving and dex arb and aggregation in general? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, so I think with non-atomic arb, you gain something by having control over inclusion, additional than just the profit. Whereas with atomic arb, like, yes, you can take the whole profit if you're building the block and you're the validator.
And you can censor your competitors.
And yeah, but I think it's still like the same like block of profit to be shared between those parties. So like, compared to if you're just running a validator on your own, you might get roughly the same share as if you were not also finding the arb, and vice versa. So
yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think you get something extra when it's non-atomic by joining.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking about like there has to be like something that might be really interesting to follow too, is like as kind of for the vertically integrated builder searchers. Like I bet at some point they're going to start doing, if they're not already doing, basically censoring other searchers, like not just censoring like other CFI DeFi arbors, but also censoring like Jared. Like, if they could steal his transactions, why not? Like, if they can basically just monitor his transactions or monitor another searcher's transactions and just basically steal these arbs, like why not? And they, if they own the block and they own the inclusion, like, they don't even have to bribe extra gas to execute that trade.
I think for block builders, there's the question of like actually getting that order flow, like or transaction flow, I guess. So to the extent that you're censoring and stealing like opportunities, will also be sort of a detriment to receiving those transactions and probably compromise your profit overall, I would say. So I do think that's a factor there, but it does probably still make sense in some cases that you would just like say, I have my way of capturing this opportunity and I'm just going to do that regardless of fees paid or whatever.
I would speculate. Sorry, I would also, I got a fast one. I would also speculate that there might be an aspect of KYC here, like whenever you do want to do massive trades on a centralized exchange, you got a KYC in order to get like withdrawal and deposit and perform those actions. So there might be that aspect as well. Like, I'm not sure, like, if Jared would like to KYC himself to Binance in order to do those trades. That
you don't need to if you're doing just dex like they are right now. Like, the builder, I suppose, would just be a way for them to, whenever they do win, if they do win, they could basically block. Jared could die. I would be shocked if Jared from Subway, if he didn't start running a block builder, didn't actually become a top 3 builder within like a month, just from only building, not sending their transactions to any other builders except for theirs, and trying to compete to win each block.
No, I think you misunderstood me. Like, I was saying, why your original question was, why is dex to dex so much more powerful than, or so much more prominent than dex to sex, right? outside the firms. And I think it's because of KYC. Like, again, it's a speculation, but like, why doesn't Jared use Binance to do any ARBs? Because he doesn't want to perform
I think-
KYC.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I
Maybe
think it's
that's kind of
flipped.
what I'm saying.
I think it's flipped. I think everybody knows who's behind Beaverbuild and Wintermute, or Beaverbuild and Rsync. I mean, I kind of answered my own thing there, but everybody knows who's behind these two firms. I think they would absolutely get roasted over the coals if they got caught sandwich attacking people. That's the real risk, because that's gray legal area right there is sandwich attacking. Yeah, but they're just back running right now, so like that's all that's all fine. But if they started doing what Jared's doing, then like maybe the centralized exchange accounts might not work anymore next week. Yeah,
it's interesting. I had this conversation with Matt when I was in Dubai. Not about the sandwich attacking, but about I think I just asked are you guys block building as well? Because I see one of the things that Matt just alluded to there was that in order to be a really successful block builder, I think you do need the order flow, but you're in a really interesting point of strength as an aggregator to direct, to have control over that sort of thing, and especially the 1inch fusions of the world, which have a very strong sort of off-chain architecture, or this gasless trading sort of thing, where you can now elect which transactions are actually even submitted to the mempool, not even just included in the block, but which ones come through at all. Like, you can actually keep this is an auction system, so it has I think they run for like 6 minutes or something on 1inch, which is a lot of blocks. Like, you can wait and see if would this transaction ever have been important to me, and you can hold that over many blocks. So you're not even getting the order flow from the mempool. You're getting it even before that, which is a very advantageous way to be. I have long suspected that a lot of these older aggregators were miners anyway, right before the merge, and I suspect that they're block builders and validators today. But yeah, I'm not sure how much of that informs their product development, but it would not surprise me if being able to annex that kind of order flow privately and then use that for your own purposes is it wouldn't be surprising at all to me if that's a major influence for how some of these things are developing.
yeah.
You guys have any? Go ahead, Caezor. Do you want to add something?
No. I'm done.
Okay. Well, if anybody does, go ahead and add your final thoughts. I want to ask maybe a quick spur of the moment favor. It was such a great conversation. I think that there are a few things that we can expand on a little bit, but I want to give our listeners, our audience, our viewers, anybody that's not on Twitter or X, right? We've got this going everywhere. What is the best way if somebody wants to follow up with you guys, have the conversation, look more into your individual projects? Where do you want to direct them to?
Well, I'll just jump in just to wrap it up. But yeah, just check out aori.io. Follow us on Twitter. But I one thing I will point out is this is definitely I think the most cutting edge, interesting part of DeFi right now. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff we should definitely continue talking about. I think it's going to be I think especially with EPBS and a lot of these new proposals that are coming out, pre-confs and where Ethereum's going over the next year or two, this is kind of definitely the stuff to be talking about. Yeah.
Well, let's do it then. Next week we actually have Alex from CowSwap. Funny that we were talking about CowSwap so much. He's going to be joining us next week. But Matt, would love to have you back on with us, and we can kind of pick up the conversation, see what has changed from then until now. And like Josh said, where do we see Ethereum in the next year?
Cool. Yeah. Sounds good.
Thanks.
And then for Odos, tell me what is the best way for somebody to follow, to find out? What do you give us? Give me your little plug here.
Sure. Yeah. So odos.xyz is the site, app.odos.xyz for swapping. And then Twitter is probably the best place for following the news and whatever else is happening.
I have to say too, Ceazor said something earlier that like you're kind of his go-to right now. I have to give my compliments to you guys as well, because once you had integrated Carbon DeFi, I had seen, because there's this Bancor alerts channel of all of the alerts, all of the orders being filled. You know, it shows, you can look at the transaction hash and who had been doing that. And you guys were just all over it, like so quick, so efficient, not just with the integration, right? But just like performance wise, you guys were just very impressive all around. So I want to give you that compliment also.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I hope one day I get to see the secret sauce, Matt. Maybe you'll open source it in 20 years or something, and give it a look.
Mark, you're
Pretty much.
unmuted. Why don't you give us your plug?
Oh, sure.
Be
Yeah.
shameless,
So
be shameless for a minute.
okay. I think we're the best. I think that in terms of what we offer, right? In terms of having in terms of on-chain, trading infrastructure, I really do think that it's not even close. And I want to delineate this, because Josh and I aren't even necessarily competitors at a product level, because we both have extremely different protocols and approaches and so on and so forth. But yeah, like if you are trading tokens and you want to, have a sort of either a fading or scaling strategy or something, like the number of limit orders that you would have to place in a conventional order book would be enormous compared to the simplicity that you get out of something like Carbon DeFi. And it's just been interesting to see, like even just over the last couple of weeks, people are like calling for the end of AMMs and liquidity pools and this sort of thing. And someone even posted on Twitter, it's like, oh, Uniswap V5 is going to be an order book. I'm like, what? Like, why you don't have to wait.
It already is. It's Uniswap X.
I see these things and I think of Josh and our conversations now. Matt, I don't know if you listened to any of our previous conversations, but I think it's like maybe every third conversation, I'm like, you guys, I'm sorry. But now that our audience is growing, we're going to have to revisit this conversation, because apparently this is the conversation that's happening right now again. And
we were the first haters of AMMs. We hated them before they was cool. Yeah.
This has been like an ongoing thing, the AMMs and the order books. I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, but it's interesting because Josh and I like met each other and I think like right at the beginning of both of our projects, right? We both had exactly the same idea, which was the AMM stuff doesn't really make sense, and it's not that difficult to create a better alternative. And yeah, it's frustrating, but also very very gratifying to see now people sort of catching up to where like my criticism was a year and a half ago.
It feels good to be right.
It feels good to be right, exactly. And so yeah, for anyone who has done the AMM thing and is a little underwhelmed with the options that you have available, just know that I have created exactly a product for you if you are feeling sort of disgruntled with the DeFi architecture. And I think that's a good segue over into Josh as well, because he and I have very similar reviews and our products are pretty similar.
We aggregate Bancor, so I'm not too worried about that, and Carbon. So yeah, definitely more synergistic than in any way competitive. Yeah.
Do you want to plug Aori for a second?
Oh yeah, sure. We're coming out live soon. Yeah, we the best way to think about us is in kind of a sense is like a meta DEX aggregator. So we have like Odos already integrated, a lot of solvers all plugged in. And yeah, I think like a good rule of thumb to think about us is kind of like we're like CowSwap, except like instead of auctions, we're really high frequency trading focused, more so than just like just pure retail order flow or auction based order flow. So I think that's probably a good way to describe us. So yeah, making sure users, protocols, trading firms have access to really fast, really excellent DeFi execution. Yeah, through great solvers like Odos and great dexes like Carbon. So yeah.
Caezor, I know that you had mentioned your YouTube early in our intros, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about it, a little bit more, and what you're
Okay.
up to.
I do have to run,
currently.
guys, but it was a pleasure.
Josh, thanks so much. We'll see you
Thanks,
next
everybody.
week.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mark. Pleasure.
Yeah, I'm not gonna really speak too much on the YouTube stuff right now, but I do have two things I want to talk about. And number one is I work with a velocimeter, and they have a licensed fork of Carbon DeFi called Graphene, and they are starting a campaign on Mantle right today actually, where they're going to incentivize uh, strategies that use certain pairs. So you can kind of check out velocimeter or Graphene and find out. And basically, if you create strategies and on Graphene, aka Carbon, right, and you and your orders are executed, then we will give you additional rewards. Like Carbon already has a system that if you perform your strategies well, they have positive ROIs that are very impressive. But with Graphene, they're also going to give you rewards on top of that. So it's quite lucrative. Like you can find it on Base, you can find it on Phantom, you can find Graphene on Mantle. But Mantle's currently going to have additional incentives in Mantle tokens for people who create certain strategies in certain pairs. Like you can create the strategy however you want, but just know that in order for you to be rewarded, you have to get executions. So that's kind of the plug for Velocimeter Graphene. And then the last thing I wanted to say was, like, just for the listeners in general, I want to really stress the idea that you should not be going to like front ends and just swapping tokens. You should not be going to Uniswap's front end and swapping tokens anymore. It's just not intelligent, especially if you're doing like a very common token. Like sometimes there's only some specific coin and ETH LP on Uniswap. Then going to Uniswap might be fine, but you're going to also have to pay front end fees to go to Uniswap. So you're better off almost always. I would say 99.999% of the time going to a DEX aggregator and using them, or even like what Josh was describing, like a DEX aggregator, like a Llama Swap, or I guess Aori is going to do this, or even like Rabby Swap kind of has like choices and stuff like that. So it'll search the different DEX aggregators for you and show you which DEX aggregator is quoting the best price. So you really shouldn't be using like just front ends that don't have like DEX aggregator integration. So that's it for me, I guess.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because all of this discussion, I don't even think we mentioned that. And Uni specifically, their fees just went up too. It was 0.15%. Now it's 0.25%, right? I don't know if you guys caught that, but that was just recently that their front end fees just increased. So definitely, I mean, even if it's still only a token that's available on Uni, it still might be beneficial to go through an aggregator. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Matt, thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure meeting you and, the others in Dubai. I'm glad that you accepted the invitation and joined us up here. Really nothing but great things to say about Odos. And definitely would like to have you back and kind of continue the conversation. It turned into much more than what we had anticipated. So it would be nice to kind of pick up where we leave off today.
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. And Mark and Caezor, I will see you guys next week. We're going to be back with Josh. And like I said, Alex from CowSwap is going to be joining us. I have a feeling that's going to turn into much more of a discussion than what I had invited him on for, but I look forward to that. So thank you guys. And thank you to all of the listeners and viewers and audience. We will be back next Tuesday for our trading call, followed by our Unfiltered on Wednesday, 4 p.m. UTC both days. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Always.